Welcome to Grace Pilled, a podcast about the spiritual process and the mysterious forces shaping your life. My name is Hanna, and since 2015, I have been a practitioner in a classical Shakta tantric tradition, which informs literally every aspect of my life, including the things that I like to talk about. I work with people to recognize the deeply spiritual patterns that are shaping their life so that they can start moving with those patterns instead of against them. This show is that whole conversation out loud again and again and again. You can work with me through my website, hannawilliams.com, or join my Patreon for deeper teachings and ongoing Q&A sessions, also a community Discord server. I also have a 100% free human design resource on my website if you want to start your human design experiment. But for now, let's get into the episode. Hey, you guys. So we are going to talk about Kundalini today, demystifying Kundalini. This is a solo episode. This is a subject that I almost never talk about publicly, despite the fact that it's been at the heart of my own spiritual tradition for the last 11 years. Part of the reason why I don't talk about it so much is that Kundalini has become one of those words that has accumulated so many disparate meanings online that it's often difficult to know what people are actually referring to, and it has just kind of felt like too Herculean of a task for me to actually get to. And dare I say, I actually may even have so much profound respect for what Kundalini actually is that I dare not even speak of it. So there's multiple reasons, but this episode is not an attempt to settle every debate or to present the only perspective on Kundalini. It's simply an invitation into the understanding of Kundalini that I have inherited through my lineage and my own practice. If you've mostly only encountered mentions of Kundalini through social media, YouTube, or stories about spontaneous awakenings that are just so delicious to read about, some of what you're about to hear might be a little bit surprising. It might be stuff that you haven't considered before. It's not that I think other people are wrong. It's like they just need to tilt their head like 2 degrees to the left, and then it all comes into focus. My hope is that this episode doesn't make Kundalini feel less mysterious, but actually more meaningful. So we're calling it demystifying Kundalini, but what if we called it re-meaningfulifying Kundalini, okay? And instead of seeing it as a strange energetic event that happens to a lucky few, I hope that you'll begin to recognize it as something that is much more intimate, much more profound and all permeating, and much more central to the spiritual path itself rather than just like a strange occurrence. So let's get into it. Let's demystify Kundalini. As always, I'm speaking from the perspective of my spiritual tradition, which is classical Shakta Tantra or Mahashakti Yoga. We could also say that I practice Mahakundalini Yoga, but I don't say that because I don't want y'all to think that I'm a Kundalini Yoga practitioner. Okay, like Guru Jagat. I'm not in that tradition. So I just say classical Tantra, which is like the finger pointing at the moon of the thing that I'm dealing with. But my tradition that I've been practicing in for the last 11 years is irrefutably a Kundalini tradition. And so let's start off on demystifying Kundalini on an interesting note. Any tradition that is geared around grace, as in specifically interested in courting grace, the evolutionary power of awakening, is a Kundalini tradition. Because the power of Kundalini is the evolutionary power of awakening. Let me say that one more time. Any tradition that is geared around grace, as in specifically interested in courting grace, is a Kundalini tradition because this power of Kundalini is the evolutionary power of awakening. But what is Kundalini? Perhaps you're familiar with it, perhaps not, but you've definitely probably heard of it. I'll first share the more common understanding of what it is. Most people understand Kundalini to be a divine form of feminine energy that lives at the base of the spine in the human body. In most people, this energy, in quotes, lives asleep, in quotes, at the base of the spine until it is roused through spiritual practice or sometimes totally spontaneously. I'm going to refer back to spontaneous awakening later. Many yoga traditions are geared around the awakening of Kundalini through various sadhanas, spiritual practice, because the idea is that liberation is not possible without the awakening of Kundalini. This is a belief that my tradition holds. I would say that's fairly true, but people can debate that. So the thing you rarely ever hear, though, is that there's no God realization without the awakening of Kundalini. And so truly, Kundalini is actually the heart of the entire spiritual process. So far, everything I just said is true on some level. Even the idea of Kundalini being divine feminine energy that lives in our spine is true to a certain extent. But as with most spiritual topics conveyed in infographics on Instagram, that is not the entire picture. Allow me to present you with the whole picture. Kundalini isn't just an energy that lives in the body. I wish you could see my finger quotes that I'm doing. Kundalini is actually everything. And so the correct understanding of what Kundalini is that Kundalini is God. Kundalini is a revealed form of God that can be somatically felt in the body and experienced in the mind. So Kundalini, is the goddess. So you can and should refer to her if you feel her in your body as Goddess Kundalini. People often talk about Kundalini as if it is just this occurrence in the subtle body, this sleeping snake, air quotes, in our being that wakes up and causes, air quotes, all sorts of experiences. But that is just a metaphor. That occurrence within the subtle body is God/grace, a revealed form of God awake in the body, doing her work to purify us so that we may come into deeper awareness of her as everything. So you are not fully engaging with the miracle of Kundalini if you believe that it's just energy in the sense of it being energy in the body, like a Reiki session or an energy work experience. Those things are valid, but should not be confused with the supreme workings of an awakened Kundalini, okay? When Kundalini is actively working in the body, the intelligence of God is literally at work trying to help you in your process better than anything you can even conceive of. Does that sound familiar to what I've covered in Grace 101? If you've listened to it, because this is why I'm saying Kundalini and Grace are kind of like the exact same thing. So it's not just energy. So what I want you to do is to expand your personal definition of Kundalini beyond just being energy, like it's an object you can hold, okay? It's actually everything. So Kundalini is not just a particular strain of divine energy. Kundalini is the goddess revealed in your awareness in the form of sensations, feelings, and even meditative experiences. Another name for goddess Kundalini is Maha Kundalini, supreme Kundalini, and she is the source, substance, and consummation of everything. So the Divine Mother, as I teach it, and goddess Kundalini are synonymous. So if you've taken Grace 101, which is free on my Patreon, when I'm talking about the Divine Mother, I'm talking about goddess Kundalini. So these things are the exact same idea. Basically, all we need to understand is that Kundalini is God and Kundalini is the evolutionary power of consciousness. And we need to understand that in order to understand what she is doing in the body. So yes, she is at work in the body, and she's also at work as everything because this power is God as everything, okay? It goes much, much further beyond the body. So let's get into more synonyms here, because this is a really complex, it's like simultaneously really simple and really complex. I think a lot of people want to box her in to being a singular thing, which effulgent consciousness never wants to be boxed in. But when I'm talking about Kundalini, prana, and grace as being synonyms, this is to kind of point to the idea that this is very complex, but also simple simultaneously. When I'm talking about Kundalini here, I want to also refer to her and to the movement of her in the body as Shakti. So Kundalini, as I'm describing it, we could refer to as the movement of Shakti. So Kundalini, prana, grace, Shakti, kind of like synonyms. If you see them all together, you get into a more unity awareness thing of what's really going on here. This can feel a little bit confusing to throw all these terms into the same box, but I think it'll start to make more sense as I continue to explain. So Kundalini and grace are synonyms. And grace, as you have already learned in Grace 101, which is free on my Patreon, is the power of revealment. It's the force of awakening at work in the world, whose only purpose is to bring you into closer awareness of God. Grace is the force of awakening at work in every atom in the universe, whose only purpose is to bring you to closer awareness of God as everything. In other words, grace is a force of awakening, and Kundalini is the exact same thing. Kundalini is also a force of awakening. We typically understand it as the force of awakening in the body. That's the way we contact it. So the difference that's happening for people is that we tend to use the word Kundalini to just describe her movements in the body and the mind. But if Kundalini is actually the goddess who is everything, then her movements are also everything as well. So you could think of it like this. At the dawn of the creation of the physical universe, Kundalini awoke in the body of the universe to give rise to physical form. That's just something for you to contemplate. Back to the synonyms, Kundalini is also prana. Prana is vital life force, the power that keeps us alive. If prana is not working in the body, you're dead. So if Kundalini and prana are synonyms, then if Kundalini is not working in the body, you die too. Logically, this means that Kundalini is actually active in everyone, whether they know it or not. Kundalini, prana, synonyms. Kundalini is at work in you right now on some level. However, the spiritual process really begins when she's not just keeping the body alive in the form of just being prana. The spiritual process really begins when she's not just keeping the body alive in the form of prana, but when she is aroused in the body and begins the work of purifying the mind so that she may return to her source within us at the crown of the head, but also going down into the heart center, which is the view that my tradition takes. So Kundalini is the power of consciousness as opposed to the witnessing passive aspect of consciousness that Lord Shiva, the so-called masculine aspect, represents. Prana, vital life force, could be understood as her cosmic energy and her movement, the movement of consciousness, the dynamism of consciousness. Another word for Kundalini awakening is pranodhana, which means the release of prana. There are actually two primary emanations of Kundalini that unfold in the mind and the body. Chit Kundalini and prana Kundalini. You will not hear this anywhere else. This is like esoteric information that I'm sharing, but I'm doing it to honor the mother because nobody fucking gets what's going on. Let's talk about Chit Kundalini. Chit Kundalini is active in the paths of self-inquiry and contemplation. A good example of this is Zen Buddhism. Anyone who has been enlightened in the Zen tradition has Chit Kundalini to thank. Chit Kundalini moves silently through the system and actually bypasses all of the chakras by jumping from the base to the crown of the head. This experience is what grants the aspirant mukti, or liberation. Okay, so it jumps. It's like an instant realization sort of a thing. Prana Kundalini, on the other hand, is active in the paths of ecstasy and devotion. So it's a much more dynamic energy that can be felt in the mind and the body. For instance, in Sufism, they refer to this sort of energy as baraka, and in the yoga traditions as kriya. Prana Kundalini ascends through all of the nadis and the chakras to clear the way for her ascent to the crown of the head. This also grants mukti, liberation, but Prana Kundalini actually rests in the heart after accomplishing her work in the crown, and this is what grants mukti, which is bliss or enjoyment. Okay? So there's this idea that Chit Kundalini leads to realization and liberation, but Prana Kundalini leads to blissful and enjoyable liberation because she ultimately emanates and is expressed through the heart center. So this is a very tantric idea that there's not only liberation that's possible in the body while you're still alive, but you can also enjoy the liberation. Once God has woken up within her own dream in the guise of the individual, she enjoys the experience. So there's this heart-centered enjoyment of the creation itself. So before you get overwhelmed, these are details that we don't need to wring our fingers over, but the only reason why I bring it up is because people have been led to believe that Kundalini is only active if it is emanated as Prana Kundalini. They don't realize this is what they believe. I'm just telling you what's really going on. So in reality, though, Chit and Prana Kundalini can be active at the same time. Or Chit Kundalini can just be active. So I say this to say that we don't need these huge peak psychedelic spiritual Kundalini awakening incidents to realize that all of this is God, but she does need to be active in the system for that to happen at all. I think that we've gotten into a trap where we think we need to have some sort of a massive spiritual experience to validate our spiritual development, when that is actually not true at all and is actually a major trap. It's a pitfall of the spiritual experience. Kundalini must be working in the mind and body in order for God realization to occur, but the way that this unfolds can be incredibly subtle. It could absolutely just be Chit Kundalini, and that can absolutely be enough. Intense, ecstatic spiritual experiences are absolutely valuable in the sense that they can humble the aspirant and build our faith. I am grateful for every single ecstatic experience I've ever had, Jai Ma. Literally by your grace alone, I have had that experience. However, these big ecstatic events can become detriments because we may become aspirants who only chase after those sorts of states. So we might begin to think that the experiences are the thing that are going to help us, when in reality, the thing that helps us is to get more interested in what the experiences actually are. We aren't chasing experiences. We're trying to come into deeper awareness of what is appearing in the form of our experiences, which is actually God, and then devote ourselves to that. What is the source of experience? The real top dog spiritual aspirant is curious about experience itself. And so ultimately, what needs to happen is that we need to allow ourselves to get out of the way so that we can be experienced by the source of experience. This is why I'm always talking about surrender. You cannot be a Kundalini yogi without also becoming a master of surrender. They go hand in hand. You will come up against a brick wall if you do not understand or learn how to have a relationship with surrender. And they go hand in hand because this awakening energy, grace, Kundalini, is trying to do her work upon us. And the only thing getting in the way is our own egos and our own beliefs about how we think things should be going, not just in the world, but even on your own spiritual path. You think you know what you need. You do not know. And so we want to get out of the way so that she can do what needs to be done to clear out our dusty ass vision. I'm sorry, but it's true. You've got dusty ass vision. You've got dust on the surface of your heart, and she's trying to clean it up, but you keep getting in the way because you think you know what's best. Okay? What a real Kundalini yogi does is surrender to the supreme intelligence of this power to the point that you're not even doing anything. You're not chasing anything. You're just being worked by her perpetually. And here's something that people need to understand. We as individuals don't actually make anything happen spiritually. We as individuals don't make God realization happen. We don't make the heart open. All we do is put ourselves into a disposition in which this purifying power can do its work upon us and surrender to this internal process that is eternally unfolding. Chogyam Trungpa said this really well. Spiritual awakening is an accident, but practice makes us accident prone. So you don't go and find it. You can't go and find the heart open. You can't go and find God. You have to surrender to the fact that it's already here, which is very subtle. What seems like an outside force that leads to your awakening is false. All transformation is an inside job. It's the power of awakening working from within to clear the way towards deeper understanding of what reality actually is. And it's also very important to understand that the movement of Kundalini itself in the body, any somatic experience of that, is a purification. She moves at the gross, subtle, and causal levels of being. We have three aspects of beings as humans. The gross aspect is the body. The subtle aspect is the mind and the chakras and the nadis. And the causal level, which is more abstract, is the aspect of our being that is more in tune with supreme consciousness. So when Kundalini moves in dynamic ways in the gross body, that's when we see big manifestations in the body and the mind, spontaneous movements, sounds, these sorts of things that can happen for people during Kundalini awakening. Something interesting that I've literally never heard anyone talk about outside of my tradition is that these big Kundalini experiences are actually indicative of the urgent need for purification. And the big experiences are actually her most dense manifestation in the body. It's the most rudimentary, dense version of what Kundalini does in the mind and the body. And yet people misguidedly believe that this is what they need to be constantly chasing. As Kundalini continues to purify the subtle body, and if you're a participant in the cleaning process, these experiences actually become more and more subtle, more and more internal and psychological and meditative. So having more and more big experiences is paradoxically not indicative of greater spiritual development. It's actually evidence that you've been throwing your toys around too much. That's a Grace 101 analogy. But like if somebody is consistently having these big experiences, that tells me that they're not holding up their end of the bargain of cleaning up themselves a bit while the Divine Mother cleans you up for you. When you're throwing your toys around too much, she gets stuck in the gross aspect of being in the body. And when we become more spiritually developed, she works in the subtle aspect. Now, consider that the next time you meet a bliss junkie. The last thing I'd like to say is actually about the emotional aspect of Kundalini purification. So what is Kundalini doing when she wakes up in the body in the first place? This is something to address. Like I said, she's awakened the body to clean it up. We can imagine that Kundalini is like our mom, the nicest mom maybe we never had, and she's looking after us and we are her children. And every day she goes through the house of our body and cleans it up. She dusts, she picks up our toys, she folds our clothes. She does this whether we know it or not. And what we do most of the time is basically undo all of the cleaning that she relentlessly and thanklessly does for us. We throw the toys out of the bin again and we spill the laundry out on the floor. This is unconscious action. We all do it. And so the way that we become participants in our awakening that she is tirelessly working to lead us to is to stop making more messes for her to clean up. So does this sound familiar? The way that we do this is the same way that you court grace, if you understand how grace works. There's self-effort and there's grace. You soak the senses in the nectar of devotion. You do selfless service. You do devotional work. You do your mantra. You do your japa. You live consciously and compassionately. You live the teachings. You live in ways that support the process you are in, the Kundalini process. And so what she is doing when she's cleaning is clearing the way for her own ascent. And that ascent can be felt in the body. So we naturally have begun to believe that awakening is correlated to the body, but that's not actually true. That's her cleaning the gross aspect, the dense aspect. Remember, reality has 3 aspects: gross, subtle, and causal. What she's actually trying to do is purify and clean the mental aspect. That's the more subtle aspect of your experience as like an embodied meat suit, okay? And why does she want to clean up the subtle aspect of our being? Because we need to clean up our vision so that we can see that all of this is God. So this is a mental and emotional process on many levels. So the more subtle manifestations of Kundalini purification can actually come about in the form of emotions that come to the surface as she is doing her work on us. She brings to the surface what needs to be purified and cleaned out so you can see more clearly. It's very logical, actually. So sometimes in the spiritual process, certain things start psychologically coming to the surface. You have very strong emotions like anger or sadness, or even you have memories from childhood. This used to happen to me a lot many years ago. Like I'm talking like 8-9 years ago. The mark of Kundalini purifying a memory is that it's just like totally random. Like this is just my own reflection. You get like a sudden flash of the train station near your childhood home or a person you haven't thought about in 20 years. In my experience, just given what I know and the fact of my own awakening, that is a purification. Now, for this reason, when Kundalini is working on us on the more subtle level and we have these more emotional experiences, this is the reason why working with an adequate guide is beneficial in the spiritual process, because these emotional purifications can actually cause people to abandon the path. All of the great yogis of yesteryear and current year knew and know this. This is why there are lineages and why the teacher-student relationship exists. Because we need to speak with people who have experienced what it is that we are experiencing. It's incredibly grounding. And an adept teacher, like a real guru, I am not a guru, a real guru can actually control that energy for you so it goes more smoothly. Without this guidance, the movements and purifications can absolutely be scary and confusing. So we need somebody who has some actual discernment who can help us to piece these things apart, okay? So the spiritual process, the entire thing that I'm always talking about, is also a synonym for Kundalini. That's the summary that we have here at the end of this episode. The spiritual process is the movement of Kundalini in the mind and the body. The spiritual process is the grace process. It's all connected. I hope something that I said today was illuminating for you. I hope you learned something, but ultimately, like, if Kundalini is actually the goddess, if the presence of Kundalini in the body is a revealed form of God, and if you are not existing in reverent awe of the fact that she has blessed you with her presence, you have dusty, musty-ass vision. There's a mantra that we use in my tradition that's a protection mantra. It actually comes from the Chandi or the Devi Mahatmya. And it's almost kind of like how in like hoodoo they use psalms from the Bible or the Christian tradition to do magic. There are stanzas from the Devi Mahatmya that people use for magical purposes or warding or things like that. And so there's a mantra that we use from the Chandi that is for protection, and it's used widely for that reason. But my guru has instructed us to use it to protect ourselves from ourselves. And he often says this, that if you receive a major boon, if you get a wave of abundance, if you are blessed with the radiance of God being felt in your body and you don't immediately inner or outwardly bow down, you need to do the protection mantra because you've got a dusty, musty ass view of reality. Those are my words. And so we're here to become reverent to the power that not only keeps your heart beating, but wants desperately to wake you up. That's what's really going on here, fam. And I think a lot of people don't realize that they've objectified the Divine Mother in the way that they speak about Kundalini. You've turned her into an object, a thing you can use, a tool. She is not a tool. You're the fucking tool. Okay? I get a little passionate about this. But if you see her as a tool, you're being the tool. You're a tool. Nobody says that people are tools anymore. That's like so 2008. Anyway, I think that's all I have for now. There's so much more to say. If you have any questions about this, you could always ask me a question on Patreon for our Q&As or on Discord, or you could book a call with me. I'm happy to answer questions, especially if you're having a Kundalini experience that you feel needs to be grounded, or if you want to reflect on an old experience. I'm really good. I'm a really good person to talk to kind of like put things into context. That's definitely one of my superpowers, is just helping people develop their own story. And so that's basically it for now. I hope this was illuminating and in the spirit of the Holy Mother, who is solely responsible for all of experience. Jai Ma.